With a few exceptions, I'm not a big fan of specialty Shabbats. What I mean by that is, I don't love when we host services with a specific demographic in mind, like fourth grade Shabbat. Because more often than that, I find that it causes the people who are not part of fourth grade families to stay home. And that's really not the goal of such things. And I also don't want to tokenize people. I don't like the idea of we have a special Shabbat where we're welcoming of this kind of person or that kind of person, which seems to indicate that all the other times of the year we don't want you to come. So it's sort of a double-edged sword that calling a Shabbat a specific special Shabbat can be challenging. This hasn't stopped a new wave of specialty Shabbatot, much like the holidays that we have, like Left-Handed Day and National Donut Day. People want to celebrate all kinds of special things, and that's a good thing, because there are a lot of these things that we want to celebrate and lift up that really should get celebrated. A couple months ago, there was an initiative to have Women's Reproductive Health Shabbat. It happened to correspond here with something else. I don't remember what, but it made it so that we didn't get to preach on that topic here, although I'm pretty sure we made up for it later. But lots of communities this month are acknowledging Pride Month, because June is our month where apparently we sequester being nice to the LGBTQ community only in 1 month. You can tell by my tone that maybe I'm less impressed by the 11 months we have on the outside of that June time period, rather than just Pride and what's happening in June. It's a hard thing to be an ally in a public-facing place, especially with social media, because there's a very fine balance to be struck. If you have a Pride night, then it must imply that all other Shabbatot aren't so welcoming. And if you don't have a Pride night, then why aren't you celebrating Pride at all? It's a tough act to play, because being a good ally sometimes means being loud and showing what you care about and who you are. Sometimes it means being quiet and getting out of the way so that other people can have their voices lifted up. We in the religious community don't really have the option to be quiet, because there are too many people using religion out there to be very, very loud about LGBTQ inclusion or the lack thereof. When you think of religion and you think of the queer community, you don't often think of warmth and welcoming and kindness, because it is the classic extreme Christian view that so often gets linked to religion and to welcoming our queer community. Much like our queer community, our Israelite family that we read about in our Torah was left to wander in the desert for what seemed like far too long. We wandered for 40 years in the desert, even though by most people's account it should take no more than a week to walk from where we say we were to where we say we wanted to go. Except we get a little bit of a hint as to why it took so long in this week's Torah portion. This week we read that as the people finished setting up the tabernacle, God's presence settled on the tent in the form of a cloud. At night, because clouds are hard to see, it would be a pillar of fire. The Israelites would know it was time to camp when that cloud of God settled on the tabernacle, and we wouldn't move on until God was ready to show us where to go next. On one hand, this may have been the most circuitous tour guide experience ever, but on another hand, we read that we didn't move on until God was ready. But perhaps what was really happening is we didn't move on until we'd learned the lesson God wanted us to learn. If you look around the world, we still see plenty of evidence that we haven't learned what it's like to be loving and kind and welcoming to the LGBTQ plus community. There are lots of places in this country, including many synagogues, who say they're warm and welcoming, who try really hard. And in many ways, that's great, because trying hard is the first step to doing good work. And there are a lot of places where trying hard hasn't quite finished the job yet, because there are still members of our community and the larger Jewish community who don't feel as comfortable here as we might want them to feel. And that's something we have to change, not something they have to change. It's our job to constantly be looking for ways to make our door even more accessible, to make those stumbling blocks even lower to the ground. I often think about Judaism as a form of counterculture, as an anchor that keeps us in place while society tries to blow us around in all kinds of places. And right now, if you look at the world outside of these walls, you see a place where, regardless of your identity, you have to work so hard to fit in and to be accepted. It is a constant struggle to look at Instagram and look at how much fun all of your friends are having. And why doesn't my life look like that? Or to constantly be checking for the approval of your peers and your coworkers and your bosses or your teachers. We live in a world where it is never really okay to say, it's all good. You're safe, you're home, and we love you just the way you are. This place needs to be that counterculture. It needs to be that counterculture independent of anything else. We love to hear the expression, I love you even if, right? Sometimes we use it in terms of grades on a test. I love you even if you fail a test. That's not our job here, even if. We need to be a place of love and kindness regardless of context. We need to be a place where we tell people and we teach them, this is a place you can come and be your best self. And in those moments where you don't feel like your best self, come here anyway. Because we're here to be with you as you figure out what your best self looks like. We are all an unfinished product, including the people in our space who are trying to be warm and welcoming, including the people in this space who are learning new things and stretching further than they've ever gone before. That's what Jewish community is supposed to be about. That's what being in sacred community is supposed to be about. Because when we look at this space, we too have a fire that burns all the time to let us know that God is in this space, and when we see it, our Ner Tamid, our eternal light, we're supposed to look at the other people around us and say, not only do I see our eternal light, but I see the eternal light in you. I see that sanctity, that thing that makes you special, that thing that makes you divine, and it's not my place to tamp that down, to extinguish it, or to make it any less vibrant. It's my job as your rabbi to be here and be loving and supportive. It's our job as your community to be here to allow you to practice the skills of whatever it means to be the best version of you. And it's the eternal light's job to remind us that as long as that light is on, you are welcome and at home here. The Israelites wandered for 40 years in the desert. And one of the reasons we have for that is because it took an entire generation of Israelites who had known slavery to die off before we could enter the promised land. It took an entire people's worth of mental shift to say, this is where we need to be in order to do this work. I hope it doesn't take us that long. I hope it doesn't take us that kind of shift. But I'd love to get to a world where I don't have to give this sermon, where we don't have to have specialty Shabbat in order to say that whatever member of the community you are, you're welcome here. I want you to drive by and to know that there's a light burning brightly welcoming you home, and all you have to do to earn deserving being here is being you. Shabbat shalom, everyone.